I'm Sophia Martinez, 27, and I never imagined I'd be sipping my ties on a Hawaiian beach while my family celebrated my sister's wedding without me. The turquoise waters of Maui stretched endlessly before me, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions churning in my heart. I'd chosen paradise over family drama, not knowing that in just 2 days, everything would literally crumble around us. Growing up in Phoenix, my sister Isabella and I were inseparable despite our 3-year age difference. I looked up to my older sister with her perfect SAT scores, flawless skin, and natural ability to make our parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, beam with pride at every family gathering. They raised us to be ambitious and independent, but it was clear early on that Isabella and I were wired completely differently. While Isabella thrived in structured environments, color-coding her textbooks and maintaining a spotless bedroom, I flourished in creative chaos. My walls were covered with photography prints, art sketches, and inspirational quotes scrawled in colorful markers. Our parents tried to appreciate my artistic nature, but I often caught them exchanging worried glances when I announced my latest unconventional plan. "Mom, I want to study photography instead of business," I declared at 17, earning a deep sigh from my mother and a concerned lecture from my father about practical career choices. Isabella, meanwhile, never caused waves. She followed the traditional path: prestigious university, business degree, corporate position at a respected marketing firm. I chose art school against my parents' wishes and built a successful freelance photography business. By 25, I had established a thriving portrait and event photography practice that allowed me to work remotely and travel frequently. "You could have security, Sophia," my mother would say during our weekly calls. "Look at Isabella, health benefits, steady paycheck, career advancement opportunities." What my mother didn't understand was that I had found security, just a different kind. My client roster was impressive, my portfolio diverse, and my income sufficient for the lifestyle I wanted. But in the Martinez family hierarchy, corporate success would always outrank creative fulfillment. Everything shifted when I met Daniel Chen at a mutual friend's gallery opening 18 months ago. I noticed him immediately, not just because he was attractive with his kind dark eyes and genuine smile, but because he was intently studying a photograph of homeless veterans, asking thoughtful questions about the artist's process and message. "That's Daniel," my friend whispered. "Software developer. Volunteers at the animal shelter, single, and surprisingly not emotionally unavailable." Our connection was instant and profound. Daniel appreciated my artistic vision, and I admired his analytical mind combined with his compassionate heart. He worked for a tech startup but had negotiated remote work flexibility. We were perfectly matched souls who valued experiences over possessions, authenticity over status. My parents cautiously approved of Daniel, especially after learning about his stable job and savings account. Isabella, however, had recently started dating Marcus Wellington, heir to a real estate development empire, and suddenly Daniel's developer salary seemed modest in comparison. Marcus was everything my parents had dreamed of for their daughters: wealthy, well-connected, ambitious. At 34, he was already a partner in his family's company and served on multiple nonprofit boards. On paper, he was perfect. In person, he was subtly condescending, especially toward creative careers like mine. "Photography," he said with a patronizing smile when we first met at my parents' anniversary dinner. "How delightful to capture pretty moments. Is there much money in that sort of hobby?" I bristled but maintained composure, explaining the business strategy and technical expertise required in my field. Marcus nodded dismissively before redirecting conversation to his recent purchase of a lakefront property. As Isabella and Marcus's relationship progressed, I watched my sister transform. Her wardrobe shifted from professional but approachable to exclusively high-end designer pieces. Her conversation incorporated phrases like "our country club" and the yacht club fundraiser. Most disturbing was how she began adopting Marcus's dismissive attitude toward careers that didn't align with their elite worldview. "Maybe it's time you considered something more substantial," Isabella suggested during a rare sisters' lunch, eyeing my bohemian dress with subtle disapproval. "Marcus knows people at advertising agencies. Real offices, real benefits, real career growth." I have a real career, I replied, trying to mask my hurt, and the freedom to work from anywhere in the world. She smiled the way adults smile at children with unrealistic dreams. Of course you do, Sophia. The divide between us widened as my parents fell under Marcus's influence. Sunday dinners became showcases for Isabella and Marcus's latest luxury acquisitions or exclusive experiences. While my updates about new clients or creative projects were met with polite but disinterested nods, their stories of wine tastings in Napa or charity galas commanded rapt attention. I tried maintaining our bond, texting Isabella about childhood memories or inside jokes, but her responses grew increasingly delayed and distant. The sister who once helped me build elaborate blanket forts was disappearing into Marcus's world, and I felt powerless to reconnect with her. The engagement announcement arrived via Instagram, a photo of Isabella's hand displaying a diamond that could fund a small business. Captioned, "She said yes. Planning begins now. #Wellington Wedding." My parents immediately called, breathless with excitement about joining the Wellington family and the social opportunities this would create. Despite our growing distance, I was genuinely happy for Isabella. When she called asking me to be her maid of honor, I accepted immediately, hoping this shared experience might repair our relationship. "Just one small thing," Isabella added after I enthusiastically agreed. "Marcus thinks your purple highlights might clash with our color palette. Would you consider going back to natural brunette for the wedding?" I touched my subtle purple-tinted hair, a creative expression that had become part of my identity, and reluctantly agreed to consider it. This was her special day, after all. The first bridesmaids meeting was held at Marcus's family's private club. I felt immediately out of place among the other bridesmaids, Marcus's sister Victoria, his cousin Amanda, and two of Isabella's new friends from their social circle, all working in finance or law, living in luxury condos, speaking a language of privilege I didn't understand. "Isabella mentioned you do something with computers?" Victoria asked during appetizers. "Photography," I corrected with a smile. "I specialize in portraits and events, building visual stories for clients." "How interesting," she replied without interest, turning to discuss European vacation destinations with the others. As lunch progressed, Isabella unveiled her wedding vision, a 3-day celebration at an exclusive mountain resort, custom designer bridesmaid dresses at our expense, mandatory pre-wedding spa packages, and a bachelorette weekend in Cabo. "The dresses will be around $4,000 each," Isabella mentioned casually. "But they're Valentino, so really it's an investment piece." My stomach dropped. I'd been saving for new camera equipment, and $4,000 for a dress I'd wear once would completely derail those plans. After the meeting, I approached Isabella privately. "I'm thrilled to be part of your day, but the costs are adding up quickly. The dress, Cabo, the spa treatments, it's beyond my budget right now. Could we explore alternatives? Maybe I could find a similar dress for less." Isabella's expression hardened. "It's my wedding, Sophia. If you can't prioritize this, maybe you should reconsider being in the bridal party." "It's not about priorities," I insisted. "It's about financial reality. I want to celebrate you, but I need to be responsible with my money." "Marcus is covering his groomsmen's expenses," she countered. "Maybe Daniel should step up." I was stunned. "Daniel and I keep our finances separate. I wouldn't expect him to pay for this." "Well, that's your unconventional arrangement," she sniffed. "Don't make your money problems my problem." 2 weeks later, my parents invited Daniel and me for dinner with Isabella and Marcus. I hoped for a relaxed evening, but should have recognized the warning signs when my mother texted specific dress code requirements. The dinner started pleasantly enough, but when conversation turned to wedding planning, I saw my opportunity. "Isabella, I've been researching alternatives for the bridesmaid dresses," I began carefully. "I found some beautiful options from sustainable designers that look very similar to the Valentino you chose, but they're more budget-friendly." The table fell silent. Marcus set down his wine glass deliberately. "I believe we've already selected Valentino," he said, his tone suggesting the matter was closed. "I understand, but I'm trying to find a compromise that works for everyone." "Compromise," Marcus repeated as if tasting something unpleasant. "Interesting concept for a wedding." Should we compromise on the venue too? Perhaps hold it at a public park with potluck catering. My cheeks burned. That's not what I meant. What Sophia is trying to say, Daniel interjected calmly, is that different people have different financial situations. Maybe there's a way to honor the vision while being inclusive. Marcus turned his cold gaze to Daniel. If financial situations are so precarious that a simple dress causes distress, perhaps priorities need examination. I notice you both travel quite frequently for people with such limited means. We budget carefully for experiences that matter to us, I defended. And my sister's wedding doesn't matter? Isabella demanded, tears welling. Of course it does. I'm just asking for flexibility. You've always been like this, my mother interrupted. Always complicating things. Why can't you just support what Isabella wants for once? The evening deteriorated rapidly. Marcus suggested that if I applied myself to a real career, financial concerns wouldn't be an issue. My father nodded in agreement. Daniel defended my work while trying to maintain peace, but the damage was done. 3 days later, Isabella called. I've been thinking, and I believe it would be best if you step down as maid of honor. Victoria will take over. Because I can't afford a $4,000 dress? I asked, fighting tears. Because you're making my wedding about your issues, she replied coldly. This should be the happiest time of my life, and you're ruining it with your constant need to be difficult. After a pause, I managed to ask, can I still attend as a guest? Her hesitation was answer enough. I think it's best if you just sit this one out. The following week brought another devastating call. Marcus thinks it would be disruptive to have you there if you can't be supportive, Isabella informed me. You're welcome to come if you apologize and commit to the original plan. Otherwise, we think it's best you skip it. My parents delivered their own ultimatum that evening, apologized to Isabella and Marcus, agree to all expenses, or be excluded from what they called the social event of the decade. For the first time in my life, I chose self-respect over family approval. The week after being officially disinvited was one of the darkest periods of my life. I cycled through grief, anger, disbelief, and crushing sadness. Daniel found me one evening on our apartment floor, surrounded by childhood photos of Isabella and me. I don't understand how we got here, I whispered. We used to be so close. Daniel sat beside me, wrapping his arms around my shoulders. People change, relationships evolve. But this isn't about you being difficult. This is about refusing to go into debt to satisfy someone else's vision. His unwavering support anchored me. While my family sent increasingly guilt-laden messages about family obligations and disappointing Isabella, Daniel reminded me that boundaries were healthy. What if I just apologize? I asked one night. Say whatever they want to hear? Would that make you feel better or worse about yourself? Daniel asked gently. The answer was clear. Capitulating might earn me a wedding invitation, but the cost to my dignity would be too high. As the sting of rejection began to fade, Daniel pointed out something I hadn't realized. The wedding date coincided with our 18-month anniversary. Instead of watching your sister marry someone who openly disrespects you, he suggested, what if we celebrated us instead? The idea took root. That night, we began researching destinations within our budget. Europe was too expensive on short notice, but Hawaii, with its off-season rates, looked promising. Maui, Daniel announced after an evening of research. I found an incredible package deal, 5 nights at a beachfront hotel, some meals included, for less than what that bridesmaid dress would have cost. For the first time in weeks, excitement bubbled up inside me. The photos were breathtaking, pristine beaches, lush landscapes, vibrant sunsets. As we scrolled through images, I felt a weight lifting. Let's do it, I decided. Let's choose happiness. We booked the trip immediately, and I experienced profound relief. Instead of dreading the wedding date, I now had something wonderful to anticipate. Before finalizing our plans, I made one last attempt at reconciliation, texting Isabella, I love you and want to celebrate your special day. While I can't afford everything you've planned, I'd still love to attend as a guest. This doesn't have to be all or nothing. Days passed without response. Meanwhile, my mother called repeatedly with increasingly dramatic messages about how I was breaking Isabella's heart and causing her pre-wedding stress. When I shared these messages with Daniel's parents during Sunday dinner, Linda and Michael Chun exchanged concerned glances. "That doesn't sound healthy, Sophia," Linda said gently. "Families should support each other, not manipulate through guilt." "You're always welcome here," Michael added. Sometimes chosen family is more supportive than blood family. Their acceptance brought tears to my eyes. This was how families should behave, loving each other through differences, not demanding conformity. As the wedding date approached, I focused on preparing for our Hawaiian getaway. I bought new swimwear, researched local attractions, and downloaded books about Hawaiian culture. With each preparation, the heavy disappointment of missing the wedding transformed into anticipation for adventure. The night before departure, while Daniel packed, I received a group text from my mother containing photos from the wedding rehearsal dinner, my parents, extended family, Isabella looking radiant, Marcus looking triumphant. The caption read, "Missing only one person to make our family complete." I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar ache when Daniel gently took the phone from my hands. "Tomorrow we'll be on a beach thousands of miles away from this drama," he said, kissing my forehead. "Let's start our vacation now by putting the phones away." He was right. I powered off my phone, finished packing, and chose to look forward rather than back. The moment we stepped off the plane in Maui, the warm, fragrant air enveloped us like an embrace. Palm trees swayed against impossibly blue skies, and the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before us. After weeks of family tension, the island felt like a sanctuary. "It smells like plumeria and ocean," I observed, feeling my shoulders relax for the first time in months. Our hotel exceeded expectations. Our room featured a private lanai overlooking the Pacific, with crystal-clear waters extending to the horizon. Fresh orchids adorned the bed, and complimentary champagne sat chilling with a welcome note. To new beginnings, Daniel toasted after pouring us each a glass. To choosing our own path, I added, clinking my glass against his. That first afternoon, we did nothing but lounge by the infinity pool, occasionally cooling off in the water and sipping tropical drinks. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Isabella or Marcus or disappointing my parents. I was simply present, soaking in sunshine and gratitude. "You look different already," Daniel observed as we prepared for dinner. "More relaxed. Your smile is genuine again." I caught my reflection and realized he was right. The tension lines around my eyes had softened, and my movements felt less guarded. "I feel lighter," I admitted, like I've set down a heavy burden I didn't know I was carrying. At dinner, we were seated at a table overlooking the beach. Tiki torches illuminated the sand, and gentle waves provided a soothing soundtrack. A couple nearby smiled warmly when our eyes met. "First time in Maui?" the woman asked. "Yes," Daniel replied. "We're celebrating our anniversary." "Congratulations. I'm Rachel, and this is my husband Tom. Second honeymoon for us." Conversation flowed easily. Rachel was a teacher, Tom an engineer, creative, practical people who understood the balance Daniel and I valued. When they invited us to join them for a snorkeling excursion, we eagerly accepted. The next morning brought underwater adventures I'd only dreamed of. Beneath the surface of that clear blue water lay an entire universe, coral formations in fantastic shapes, tropical fish in every color imaginable, even a sea turtle that glided past with ancient grace. After snorkeling, the four of us explored a local farmer's market where I purchased handmade jewelry crafted from local materials and Daniel bought coffee beans from a family farm. We sampled local specialties, fresh poke bowls, tropical fruit smoothies, and macadamia nut cookies still warm from the oven. That evening, Daniel surprised me with a private dinner on the beach. Under a canopy of stars, with sand between our toes and the gentle rhythm of waves as our soundtrack, we talked about everything and nothing. "Do you think we made a mistake?" I asked after my second glass of wine loosened my tongue. "Choosing to be here instead of fighting harder to attend the wedding?" Daniel considered thoughtfully. "I think we chose self-respect over self-sacrifice. There's a difference between compromise and capitulation. Your family wasn't asking you to meet them halfway. They were demanding total surrender regardless of the cost to you. But family is supposed to be forever, I countered. Family should be forever, Daniel agreed. But that doesn't mean accepting mistreatment. Real family relationships have room for individuality and mutual respect. As our conversation deepened, we naturally discussed our own future. Under that star-filled Hawaiian sky, we talked about what our wedding might look like someday, something intimate and meaningful, focused on celebration rather than spectacle. No $4,000 bridesmaid dresses, I promised with a smile. And no excluding people because they don't fit some arbitrary mold, Daniel added. Later that night, I made the mistake of checking Instagram. My feed was flooded with photos from Isabella's rehearsal dinner. Family members I loved dressed elegantly, raising glasses to the happy couple. The hashtag Wellington Wedding hashtag was trending among my relatives. Despite knowing I'd made the right decision, seeing visual evidence of being the only one missing sent a wave of sadness through me. Daniel found me on the lanai, tears streaming down my face as I clutched my phone. "Oh, Sophia," he sighed, sitting beside me and pulling me close. "You didn't ruin anything by looking." It's natural to feel sad about missing family moments, even when you know you're protecting yourself. We sat quietly, watching moonlight create a silver pathway across the dark water. "I have a suggestion," Daniel finally said. "Let's go completely offline for the rest of the trip. No social media, no emails, just us and this beautiful island." The suggestion was both terrifying and liberating. What if there's an emergency? The hotel has our information. If something truly urgent happens, we can be reached. Otherwise, let's give ourselves permission to fully disconnect. After a moment's consideration, I nodded. We powered down our phones and locked them in the room safe. The immediate sense of freedom was intoxicating. The next 3 days were among the most present and connected of my life. Without constant digital distractions, we experienced Maui with all our senses engaged. We hiked through bamboo forests to hidden waterfalls, learned traditional hula dancing at a cultural center, and watched spectacular sunsets paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. We made friends with other travelers and locals alike, joining a family's beach barbecue, learning to surf from a patient instructor, dancing to live music at a small-town festival. Most precious were the uninterrupted conversations with Daniel. Without screens between us, we rediscovered the art of complete attention. We shared childhood memories, professional dreams, philosophical questions, and silly hypotheticals. I felt myself healing from the family rejection that had consumed my thoughts for weeks. The perspective gained from distance allowed me to see that my worth wasn't determined by Isabella's approval or my parents' understanding. I was building a life aligned with my values alongside someone who supported my authentic self. On our 5th morning in paradise, I woke feeling truly peaceful for the first time since the wedding drama began. The Hawaiian sunrise painted our room golden, and I stretched contentedly, looking forward to another day of exploration. I had no way of knowing that within hours, our idyllic retreat would transform into a nightmare beyond imagination. The first sign something was wrong came at breakfast. The usually cheerful staff seemed tense, speaking in hushed tones and frequently checking their phones. The sky, while still blue, had a strange quality, an unnatural stillness that made me uneasy. "Something feels off," I mentioned to Daniel as we finished our passion fruit pancakes. Before he could respond, the hotel manager approached with a tight smile. "Good morning. I hate to interrupt, but we've received a severe weather alert. Hurricane Kona has strengthened overnight and changed course toward the Hawaiian Islands." My stomach dropped. Hurricane? There wasn't any warning yesterday. "It developed rapidly and shifted direction unexpectedly," he explained, handing us a printed bulletin. "The state is implementing evacuation protocols for coastal areas, including our hotel." The bulletin showed satellite images of an ominous spiral approaching the island chain. Hurricane Kona had intensified to Category 4 strength with sustained winds of 145 miles per hour, projected to make landfall within 18 hours. "What does this mean for guests?" Daniel asked, his analytical mind processing the information. We're arranging transportation to designated shelters inland, the manager explained. Please return to your rooms immediately, pack essentials in one small bag, and gather in the lobby within 1 hour. Back in our room, chaos replaced serenity. Outside our window, hotel staff frantically secured outdoor furniture and boarded windows. The previously gentle ocean had turned aggressive, with white-capped waves crashing violently against the shore. We retrieved our phones from the safe to find dozens of missed calls and messages from family and friends who had been following the hurricane news while we remained blissfully unaware. No time to respond now, Daniel said, stuffing essentials into our backpacks. We'll call everyone once we're safe. I grabbed our passports, medications, wallets, a change of clothes, and our phones. As an afterthought, I added a photo of Daniel and me from the nightstand, a small reminder of happiness amid the developing crisis. In the lobby, the atmosphere was tense but organized. Hotel staff efficiently arranged guests into groups based on transportation availability. Families with children and elderly guests were prioritized for first departures. The main shelter is at a community college in the Central Mountains, a staff member explained as we boarded a shuttle bus. It's built to hurricane standards and well above potential flood zones. The drive inland was sobering. Locals were boarding up homes and businesses, securing boats, and loading vehicles with belongings. Many waved at our bus of tourists with expressions of genuine concern, a touching reminder of Hawaiian hospitality even in crisis. The shelter, a sturdy concrete building, was filling rapidly when we arrived. Emergency officials directed the flow of evacuees, assigning spaces in classrooms and hallways. Daniel and I secured a spot along a wall in what appeared to be a computer lab, spreading emergency blankets provided by shelter staff. It's going to be a long night, Daniel observed, looking around at the hundreds of people settling in. As afternoon turned to evening, the weather deteriorated rapidly. Rain began gently, but soon transformed into sheets of water pounding the windows. Wind howled around the building's corners with increasing intensity, producing an eerie wailing sound. By 8 p.m., power went out. Emergency generators provided minimal lighting in main areas, while most spaces were illuminated only by flashlights and battery-powered lanterns. A local family with 2 young children settled next to us. The mother, Leilani, tried maintaining calm while clearly terrified. When her youngest daughter began crying at a particularly loud thunderclap, I found myself offering comfort. "Would you like to see something cool?" I asked, pulling out my phone's flashlight. Using my hands, I created shadow animals on the wall, a bird, a dog, a dancing hula dancer. Her tears stopped as she watched in fascination. "Show me how." Soon I was teaching both children shadow puppetry, providing distraction from the intensifying storm outside. Around midnight, Hurricane Kona made direct landfall. Nothing in my life had prepared me for nature's raw violence. The building, designed for such forces, nevertheless shuddered and groaned under the assault. Windows rattled with terrifying intensity despite their protective boarding. The noise was most frightening, a constant roar punctuated by crashes as debris struck the building. Each impact drew gasps and cries from shelter occupants. Children whimpered, adults prayed, and emergency workers moved among us offering reassurance. Daniel remained steady throughout the night. While I alternated between anxiety and attempts to comfort others, he maintained calm strength, his arm around my shoulders providing silent support. "The ice should pass over soon," he mentioned after consulting with an emergency worker. "There will be calm before the second half hits." Around 2 a.m., the howling winds and pounding rain suddenly ceased, creating eerie silence almost as unnatural as the storm. Officials warned everyone to remain inside despite the temptation to venture out during this deceptive calm. Within 40 minutes, the storm returned with renewed fury, attacking from the opposite direction. This time I was prepared but no less frightened. Dawn broke with the hurricane still raging, though somewhat diminished. The generator had failed hours earlier, leaving us in darkness except for emergency lighting. Cell service had disappeared completely, cutting us off from the outside world. By mid-morning, Hurricane Kona finally passed, leaving uncanny quiet in its wake. Emergency officials began organizing assessment teams while instructing evacuees to remain sheltered until the all-clear. When we were finally permitted outside around noon, the scene was one of stunning devastation. The lush tropical landscape had been transformed, trees stripped bare or uprooted, roads blocked by debris, buildings with roofs torn away or walls collapsed. A local official with a battery-powered radio delivered sobering news. Hurricane Kona was the strongest storm to hit Hawaii in over 60 years. Coastal areas had suffered catastrophic damage, including the hotel where we'd been staying. The Ocean Vista Resort's main building has partially collapsed, he announced. Thankfully, successful evacuation prevented casualties among guests and staff. Daniel and I exchanged stunned glances. Our room had been in that building. If we hadn't evacuated, we might not have survived, I whispered. Daniel pulled me close as we processed this near miss with tragedy. Any word on when communications might be restored? Someone asked. Cell towers are down across most of the island, the official replied. Emergency services are working to establish satellite communication, but it could be days. That meant days before we could contact our families, who must be frantic with worry. Despite our recent conflicts, I didn't want them to suffer that kind of fear. As we contemplated our situation, an emergency worker approached with a clipboard. We're arranging transportation to undamaged areas for tourists. However, the airport sustained significant damage and will be closed for at least a week. Reality was setting in. We were stranded on an island devastated by a natural disaster, unable to communicate with loved ones, with no immediate way home. The days following Hurricane Kona became a masterclass in perspective. Our priorities shifted instantaneously from vacation pleasures to basic survival needs: clean water, food, shelter, and safety. Infrastructure damage was extensive. Power lines down across the island, water systems compromised, roads blocked or washed away. Local authorities organized emergency response admirably under the circumstances. Tourists and locals alike were directed to functional inland hotels and shelters. Daniel and I shared a small room with Rachel, Tom, and an elderly couple from Canada, grateful for walls and a roof when so many had lost their homes. Water was rationed, 2 liters per person daily for drinking, with brief cold showers permitted every other day. Meals consisted primarily of rice, beans, and whatever local produce had survived, bananas harvested before the storm and root vegetables dug from the ground afterward. Yet amid these hardships, I witnessed something extraordinary, humanity's finest qualities emerging from crisis. Tourists with medical training volunteered at makeshift clinics. Those with language skills served as translators. Everyone contributed however they could. They need help distributing supplies in the village down the road, Daniel mentioned on our second morning. I volunteered us. Soon we were loading cases of bottled water and boxes of non-perishable food onto pickup trucks, then helping distribute essentials to local families. Their gratitude, despite having lost nearly everything, humbled me profoundly. Rachel and Tom joined us, forming an efficient team. Working alongside Hawaiians, I learned the true meaning of resilience. One elderly woman whose home had been destroyed insisted on giving me a preserved mango from her emergency supplies. "We share what we have," she said simply when I protested. "Today I have mango to share." Her gesture brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had lost nearly everything, yet still practiced generosity. My family conflict over a $4,000 dress suddenly seemed not just petty, but obscenely privileged. On the third day, limited cell service was restored in our area. The scramble to contact loved ones was immediate and emotional, with dozens of people crowded around the few functioning power outlets to charge phones. When I finally reached my parents, my mother answered with a sob. "Sophia, thank God. We've been out of our minds with worry." "We're safe," I assured her, my voice thick with emotion. The hotel was badly damaged, but we were evacuated before the worst hit. "Isabella postponed the wedding," she informed me, shocking me into silence. "When we heard about the hurricane and couldn't reach you, she couldn't go through with it." The news stunned me. Isabella had postponed her meticulously planned, extremely expensive wedding out of concern for me. She's been beside herself, my mother continued. We all have. Marcus has been using his connections to try getting information about American citizens in Hawaii. Even Marcus had been concerned. The revelation forced me to reconsider my assumptions. Can I talk to Isabella? I asked. A moment later, my sister's voice came through, thick with tears. Sophia, are you really okay? I'm fine, I assured her. Uncomfortable and dirty, but safe. Daniel's here with me. We've been helping with relief efforts. I was so scared, she admitted. When we saw the news about hotels collapsing and couldn't reach you, I realized how stupid I've been. A wedding isn't worth losing my sister. The raw honesty in her voice broke down walls I'd built around my heart. I still want you there, she continued, as my maid of honor, if you're willing. We've rescheduled for next month. I'd be honored, I replied sincerely, though I can't promise I'll be back by then. The airport is closed indefinitely. Whatever it takes, Isabella insisted. Just come home safely. When Marcus briefly took the phone, his tone lacked its usual condescension. Glad you're safe, Sophia. Let us know if there's anything you need. I have contacts who might help with evacuation. Though still formal, the offer seemed genuine. The next 5 days continued in similar patterns, volunteering during daylight, sharing limited resources, and forming bonds with fellow survivors that felt deeper than friendships developed over years in normal circumstances. I noticed significant changes in myself. Material concerns that once seemed important, designer clothes, the latest gadgets, social media validation, now felt trivially unimportant. Instead, I found profound satisfaction in helping others, in problem-solving with limited resources, in human connection unmediated by status or appearances. Daniel and I had several deep conversations during those long nights by lantern light. What will you take from this experience? He asked as we sat looking at stars brilliant in the absence of artificial light. I considered carefully. Perspective and gratitude. We spend so much energy on things that don't matter, status, appearances, meeting others' expectations. When survival is at stake, all that falls away. And your family? I understand them better now, I admitted. They're flawed, sometimes hurtful, but they love me. When they thought they might lose me, everything else became secondary. Will you do anything differently when we get home? Set clearer boundaries, I said without hesitation, but with compassion rather than resentment. I can love them without needing their approval for every choice. Daniel smiled, taking my hand. That sounds like growth. On our 8th day post-hurricane, news arrived that military transport planes were being arranged to evacuate tourists and vulnerable residents. Priority would be given to medical cases, families with children, and elderly individuals. You should go, Rachel urged when we discussed options. Your family is worried, and they've rescheduled the wedding for you. What about you two? Tom shook his head. We've decided to stay another week if they'll let us. As a teacher, Rachel can help with the children at the temporary school they're setting up, and I've been working with local contractors on rebuilding projects. Their selflessness inspired me, but I also recognized that returning home would bring closure for my worried family. Securing passage required an entire day at the makeshift evacuation center, waiting as officials processed paperwork and assigned priorities. Late in the afternoon, our names were called for the next morning's flight. That night, we said emotional goodbyes to people who had become like family during our ordeal. This experience changes you, the Canadian woman said, hugging me tightly. Don't let that wisdom slip away when you return to normal life. I promised her I wouldn't. Our journey home was long and uncomfortable, a crowded military transport, followed by commercial flights on standby status. But eventually we touched down at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, exhausted and wearing the same clothes for days. Both our families waited with handmade welcome signs, fighting back tears. My mother reached me first, embracing me so tightly I could barely breathe. My baby, she sobbed. Thank God you're safe. My father, typically reserved, made no effort to hide his tears as he wrapped his arms around us both. Behind them stood Isabella, uncharacteristically dressed down in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup and marked by sleepless nights. When we separated from our group embrace, she stepped forward hesitantly. But words failed her. Instead, she threw her arms around me, shaking with silent
sobs.
"It's okay," I whispered, holding her tightly.
I'm okay.
Daniel was experiencing a similar reunion with his parents. Through my tears, I saw Linda Chen cradling her son's face, examining him as if to ensure he was truly unharmed, while Michael repeatedly patted his shoulder, relief and pride mixing in his expression. The drive home was filled with questions about our experience. We shared abbreviated versions, too exhausted for full details, but wanting to satisfy their concern. "We saw footage of your hotel," my father said soberly. "The main building partially collapsed into the ocean. If you'd been in your room..." My mother shuddered. "But we weren't," Daniel interjected gently. "We were safely evacuated thanks to quick action by the staff." At my parents' house, Daniel's family joined us for an impromptu welcome dinner. My mother had prepared all my favorites: enchiladas, Spanish rice, fresh guacamole, and though I was still adjusting to regular meals after days of rationing, I appreciated the loving gesture. During a quiet moment, Isabella pulled me aside into the kitchen. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice low and serious. "The hurricane almost losing you, it made me see things differently. Including Marcus." My eyebrows rose in surprise. "What do you mean?" She twisted her engagement ring nervously. "When I wanted to postpone the wedding, his first concern was the inconvenience and lost deposits. Not you, not what I was going through. Then I started noticing other things. How he talks about people who aren't wealthy, how he dismissed the hurricane damage as just what happens in those places." "Isabella," I began carefully, "are you having doubts about marrying him?" Her eyes welled with tears. "Is it terrible that it took almost losing my sister to see who he really is?" I pulled her into another hug. "It's not terrible. Sometimes we need a shock to see what's been in front of us." "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Everything's arranged. People expect it. Mom and Dad adore him." "What does your heart tell you?" I asked. Before she could answer, my mother entered the kitchen, interrupting our conversation. But a new understanding had formed between us. The following weeks were a period of adjustment and healing. Daniel and I attended counseling to process the hurricane trauma while gradually integrating its lessons into our daily lives. My relationship with my family entered a new phase. During a family dinner 2 weeks after our return, my father raised his glass. "To perspective," he said solemnly. "Sometimes it takes almost losing someone to realize what truly matters." My mother nodded tearfully. "I'm sorry we got so caught up in wedding details that we lost sight of what's important, that our daughters are happy and healthy. And I'm sorry I tried to force you into a mold that doesn't fit," Isabella added, looking directly at me. "Your different path isn't wrong. It's just different, and it's perfectly you." Their words were healing balm to wounds I'd carried for years. "I haven't always made it easy," I acknowledged. "Sometimes I've rejected your advice just to prove my independence, even when your wisdom might have helped." "Maybe we all need to listen better," my father suggested. "Really listen, not just wait for our turn to speak." That conversation marked a new era in our family dynamics. We started having regular Sunday dinners where everyone's voice was valued. My parents began asking genuine questions about my photography, showing interest in my creative process rather than concern about financial stability. The most significant change was in Isabella. 3 weeks after our return, she asked me to meet for coffee at our old teenage hangout. "I ended things with Marcus," she announced without preamble. Though I'd suspected this might happen, the finality surprised me. "How did he take it?" "About as well as you'd expect," she said with a wry smile. First denial, then trying to negotiate as if my feelings were a business deal, finally accusing me of having a trauma-induced breakdown. "And the wedding?" "Cancelled. Not postponed, cancelled." She took a deep breath. "It's been messy. His family is furious about the embarrassment. Some friends think I'm crazy to walk away from Marcus Wellington. But you know what?"
"What?"
For the first time in years, Her smile reached her eyes. I feel lighter, like I can breathe again. I didn't realize how much I'd been compromising myself to fit his expectations. That's what matters, I assured her. I've been thinking about what comes next, she continued. I've been at the same firm for 6 years, following the expected path. Maybe it's time for something different. Like what? Remember how I always wanted to work in art conservation? Before Dad convinced me finance was more practical? I nodded, surprised she'd revived this abandoned dream. There's a program at the Phoenix Art Museum. It would mean a pay cut and starting over, but... She shrugged, excitement flickering in her eyes. You should do it, I encouraged. Life's too short not to pursue what brings you joy. That's what I learned watching you all these years, she admitted. Despite our parents' worries, despite my judgments, you built a life that authentically reflects who you are. I envied that while simultaneously criticizing it. Her honesty touched me deeply. It's never too late to change course. Over the following months, our family continued healing and evolving. Isabella enrolled in her conservation program, moved to a smaller apartment, and gradually distanced herself from Marcus's social circle. Our parents, after initial concern about her abandoning her finance career, came to support her decision when they saw her happiness. As for Daniel and me, the experience strengthened our bond in ways I couldn't have imagined. 6 months after the hurricane, during a sunset hike in the desert mountains outside Phoenix, he stopped and turned to me. The hurricane taught me that life can change instantly, he said, reaching into his pocket, and that I don't want to waste a single day not being fully committed to you. The ring he offered was simple and elegant, a moonstone surrounded by small diamonds that caught the fading light. I chose moonstone because it reminded me of the Hawaiian moonlight, he explained. A beautiful memory from a difficult experience. Through happy tears, I accepted both the ring and the future it represented. When we began planning our wedding, I knew exactly who to ask as my maid of honor. Isabella accepted with tears in her eyes, promising a drama-free experience focused on celebration. I was thinking, she suggested during planning, what if we held it at that community art center where you volunteer? It's beautiful with all the murals, and the rental fee would support their programs. Her suggestion, so different from her previous wedding vision, confirmed her growth. Our wedding planning reflected our values: authenticity over appearance, meaning over materialism, inclusion over exclusivity. When my mother occasionally slipped into old patterns, suggesting elaborate decorations or questioning our choice of food trucks for catering, I gently reminded her of our priorities, and she quickly realigned. Looking back now, I can see how being banned from Isabella's wedding set in motion events that ultimately strengthened our family. The hurricane that destroyed buildings also swept away pretenses, leaving only what was solid and true. Sometimes the structures we build, whether physical buildings or emotional walls, need to collapse before we can construct something stronger and more authentic. For my family, it took a natural disaster to break through years of accumulated expectations and judgments, creating space for genuine understanding and acceptance. The journey wasn't easy, but the destination was worth every difficult step. From being banned from a wedding to building deeper connections, from surviving a hurricane to creating a life of purpose and authenticity, these experiences taught me that our greatest challenges often lead to our most important transformations. What started as the worst period of my life, being excluded from my sister's wedding, became the catalyst for the best. A stronger relationship with Daniel, a healthier dynamic with my family, and most importantly, a clearer understanding of who I am and what truly matters. Sometimes when everything falls apart, it makes space for something beautiful to grow in its place.